Friends, welcome to Data Analytics Talks. You are listening to Biju. In this session, I would like to explore reference and master data, which is the 10th chapter of DAMA DMBOK. Once again, a key subject areas of DAMA will. So, yes, understanding all about reference and master data. So, what I understood is in any organization, certain data is required across business areas, processes, and systems. The overall organization and its customers benefit if this data is shared and all business units can access the same customer list, geographic location code, business unit list, delivery options, part list, accounting cost center code, and government tax code, and other data used to run the business. So people using data generally assume a level of consistency exists across the organization until they see disparate data. In most organization, systems and data evolve more organically than data management professionals would like. Particularly in large organization, various projects and initiatives, there could be mergers and acquisition and other business activities result in multiple system executing essentially same function, isolated from each other. So these conditions inevitably lead to inconsistencies in data structure and data values between the system. So this variability increases cost and risk. So both can be reduced through a management of master data and reference data. So definition and goals of master and reference data. So managing reconciled and integrated data through stewardship and semantic consistency in support of enterprise-wide needs to share its data sets. If you break down, we can see managing reconciled and integrated data through stewardship and semantic consistency in support of enterprise-wide needs to share its data assets. So there are multiple goals to ensure the organization has complete, consistent, current, authoritative master and reference data across organizational processes. Secondly, enabling master and reference data to be shared across enterprise functions and applications. And thirdly, it is lowering the cost and reducing the complexity of data usage and integration through standards, common data models, and integration patterns. So there are three major goals of reference and master data. Moving on, we have the context diagram. The context diagram starts with the definition. We already seen that. Then the goals, then various business driver activities, inputs, deliverables, who are the participants, suppliers, and consumers, and also talks about technical drivers. So, to have a clear idea about the activities, we have to define the drivers and requirements, then evaluate and access data sources, define architectural approach, model data, define stewardship and maintenance process, establish governance policies, implement data sharing integration services, which means acquiring data source for sharing, publishing reference and master data. So we will look into each of the activities in the coming slides. And who are the inputs and what are the inputs? So candidate data store and values, cross-functional requirement, industry standards, metadata, purchase data, and open data and code set. Business rules are all input to the active business driver activities. The deliverable will be master and reference data requirement, data models and integration patterns, label reference and master data, reusable data services, data exception report. Then who will be supplying these inputs? Subject matter experts, data stewards, application developers, data providers, business analyst, infrastructure system analyst. So who will participate in the activities? Data analyst, data modeler, data stewards, data integrators, data architects, data quality analyst. Who will consume the output? So they are subject matter experts, data integrators, application users, application developers, solution architects. In order to support this activity, there should be technical drivers, there should be some techniques, then there should be tools and some of the metrics to measure the KPI. Let me understand the business drivers. DAMA talks about four business drivers. Let's talk about why managing organization data is so important. To understand the first business driver, which is meeting organizational data requirements. So imagine you are working in a company where different departments, say sales, finance, and organizations, all need access to the same set of information. Wouldn't it be great if everyone could rely on that data being complete, up to date, and consistent? That's exactly what effective data management aims to achieve. The multiple areas within an organization need access to the same data set with the confidence that data sets are complete, current, and consistent. Now, moving on, managing data quality, which is a business driver. Think about data quality. If the data you are working with is not accurate and has gap, you might end up making wrong decisions, or you could miss out on valuable opportunities. And this is where master data management comes in. It helps keep things consistent and reliable when it comes to the information that is critical to your organization. So, managing data quality. So, data inconsistencies, quality issues, and gaps lead to incorrect decisions or lost opportunities. The master data management reduces this risk by enabling a consistent representation of the entities critical to the organization. Then the third one, managing cost and data integration. So, what about cost involved in integrating new data sources? So, linking new information into already complicated data environment can be expensive and tricky too. So, especially if each department defines things differently. So, master data helps by reducing this variation, making integration smoother and less costly. So, the third business driver is about managing cost, data, and integration. The cost of integrating new data sources into already complex environments are higher in the absence of master data, which reduces variation in how critical entities are defined and identified. And finally, it helps in reducing the risk. So let's talk about risk. So when you have a simplified, unified way of sharing data across your organization, you can cut down on both expense and the risk that comes with the complex data landscape. So in short, master data management is not just about data, it is about making business operations easier, more efficient, and less risky for everyone involved. That's a business drivers for master and reference data. Then some of the principles behind master and reference data. Let's break these principles down in a way that is easy to relate. So first of all, so when we talk about shared data, we mean that reference and master data should be managed so that everyone in the organization can access and use them. So not just one department or team. It is like having one common source everyone can trust, rather than each team keeping their own version of truth. So the first principle is shared data. So reference and master data must be managed so that they are shareable across the organization. Second one is about the ownership. So about the ownership, this data does not belong to a single department or an application. It is actually the organization's asset as a whole. So because so many people rely on it, there needs to be a proper stewardship. Think of it having a responsible caretaker who looks after the data and makes sure it is staying in good shape. So reference master data belongs to organization and not to a particular application or department because they are widely shared. They require high level of stewardship. And third one is a quality. Reference and master data management requires ongoing data quality monitoring and guidance. So managing reference and master data is not one-time job. It is something that needs ongoing attention. So regular checks and governance help keep the data accurate, up to date. So everyone's decision are being based on the right information. Then we have stewardship. The business data stewards are accountable for controlling and ensuring quality of reference data. So that brings us to stewardship. So there are specific people in the business called data stewards whose job is to control and ensure the quality of reference data. They are like guardians of the data, making sure it stays reliable. Then controlled usage. So it's not open to everyone. So when it's come to making changes, so controlled change is the key. At any given point, the master data should reflect the most accurate and current picture of what the organization knows. If you need to update reference data, there should defined process for that. Changes must get approved, communicated before they go live, so nothing slips through the cracks. Then finally, authority. The master data values should be replicated only from the system of record. System of reference must be required to enable sharing of master data across organization. So let's talk about authority also. So master data values should only be copied from the main trusted system, what we call the system of record. Sometime to make sharing easier across organization, a separate system of reference might be used as well. So this help ensure that everyone is always working with the best and most up-to-date data. So time to explore some of the essential concepts in master and reference data. So we'll see what is master data and what is a reference data, what is master data management, what is reference data management. So reference data characterizes other data or links to external information. A data that is used to solely to characterize other data in an organization or solely to relate data in a database to information beyond the boundaries of the organization. The examples are like code and description table. Then master data aggregates references, enterprise, and transaction data. So aggregation of reference data, enterprise structure data, and transaction structure data, etc. are master data. So master data objects represent those things that matter most to the organization. Those that are logged in transaction, reported on, measured, analyzed. Example, customers, products, employees, vendors, and so on. Now we know what is reference data. Now we know what is reference master data. So what is a master data management? So that is a process that ensures consistent, accurate use across systems. The control over master data values and identifiers that enable consistent use across systems of most accurate and timely data about essential business entities. And coming to reference data management RDM, to control over definition domain values and their definitions. The goal is to ensure the organization has access to a complete set of accurate current values for each concept represented. So going on, let's look into some of the reference data structure. Already we understand those data used to characterize or classify other data or relate data to information external to an organization. The most basic reference data consists of code and description. But some reference data can be more complex and incorporate mapping and hierarchies. They exist virtually in every database. So some of the reference data structure are list, cross-reference list, taxonomies, ontologies, proprietary or internal reference data, industry reference data, geographical, computational, and standard reference data set metadata, and so on. So let me try to explain each of them. What is a list? A list is a simple enumeration of items or values, such as a list of country code. For example, we have the US, United States, GB, Great Britain or United Kingdom, IN, India. So this is a simple list. Then we have cross reference list. This is a cross reference list. A table that links related items from different lists or systems. For instance, mapping product SKUs to vendor code. You can see different uh, code in this table. You have USPS state code, ISO state code. You have also state abbreviation. So they are basically linking related items from different lists or different systems. Then we have taxonomies. Taxonomy is a hierarchical classification schemes such as a categorization of product into electronics, clothing, and groceries. So electronics, then mobile phone, then smartphone. So when you look into some of the e-commerce site, you can see category electronics, mobile phones, smartphones, and so on. That's called taxonomy. Then ontologies, the structured framework that define relationship between concepts, like describing how employee is related to department and role within an organization. So it is defining the relationship between concepts, that is the ontologies. Then proprietary or internal reference data. So data set unique to an organization, such as a customer list of department codes used only within the company. HR01 for human resource. So it's a proprietary or internal reference data. Then it talks about industry reference data. Standardized data shared across the industry, like International Financial Reporting Standard IFRS code used by accounting professional. Then geographical or geostatistical data, like data representing location or spatial statistics, such as latitude and longitude coordinates of cities. Example, Delhi to 8.6139 north, 7.2090 east. Then computational reference data used for calculation or algorithms, such as atomic weight in chemistry, hydrogen equal to 1.008. Then finally, you have the standard reference data set metadata. So metadata describes a standardized reference data set, like version, source, and update frequency of the national postal code in directory, and so on. So we have seen list, cross reference list, taxonomies, ontologies, proprietary, and finally the standard reference data set metadata. So we'll move on to master data structure. This chapter talks about master data. Master data is a data about business entities, example, employees, customers, products, financial structures, assets, location. They provide a context for business transaction analysis. An entity is a real world object, a person, organization, place, or thing. They represent by entity instances in the form of data or records. So master data should represent authoritative, most accurate data available about key business entities. So when managed well, master data values are trusted and can be used with confidence. So when you think about master data, think about party master data, financial master data, legal master data, location master data, and industry metadata. So they are core high value data about business entities that provide context for business and transaction. So party master data includes individuals, organizations who are involved in the business operations. Example, customers, suppliers, and employees and so on. It's also include like product and services like goods or offering provided by a business, such as iPhone, annual maintenance contract, all fall into the master data. Coming to financial master data, some of the financial structures like organizational accounts and hierarchies like chart of accounts or business units. Locations are geographical places relevant to business, such as branch offices or warehouses. Then system of record and system of reference. That's another key concept in master data and reference data. The authoritative source for a particular piece of data that is called system of record, and the secondary reliable source system of reference. For example, the HR system as a system of record for employee data. Then in master data, we hear about trusted source and golden record, the most accurate and complete version of a data entity created by consolidating information from multiple sources. That is the golden record or trusted source. A unified customer profile built from various databases is a trusted source or golden record. Then master data management is another concept. The discipline and processes for ensuring master data accurate, consistent, and controlled across organization. That's master data management. Next, master data management, the key processing steps. There are critical stages in managing master data from modeling to sharing. We can say data model management, data acquisition, data validation, standardization, enrichment, entity resolution, and identifier management. So data model management is designing and maintaining the structure and relationship of master data, such as defining how customers and orders are linked. When it comes to data acquisition, collecting master data from internal or external sources. Example, importing product data from vendors. Data validation and standardization includes checking for accuracy, formatting data uniformly, adding missing information, for example, standardizing address format, appending postal codes, etc. Then entity resolution and identifier management, identifying and linking records that refer to the same real world entity, such as recognizing that Amit Kumar and A. Amit Kumar are the same person. That is entity resolution and identifier management. For that, we use multiple techniques like matching, identify, resolution, master data ID management, affiliation management, data sharing and stewardship, and so on. So matching is comparing records to identify duplicates or relationships, like matching customer entity across systems. Identity resolution means process to accurately determine and confirm an entity unique identity, verifying a customer's using multiple identifiers. Master data ID management, assigning and maintaining unique identifiers for master data entities such as customer ID. Affiliation management, the tracking and relationship between entities like linking employees to departments. That is affiliation management. Finally, data sharing and stewardship, facilitating secure sharing of master data and assigning responsibility for its quality and maintenance. Next topic is MDM activities. we can see multiple defined activities for MDM. Starts with defining MDM drivers and requirements, in which we want to identify the key business motives and objectives for implementing master data management. It could be improving data quality, supporting compliance, or enabling better analytics, and document the specific requirement that the MDM initiative must fulfill. That is the MDM drivers and requirement step. Second step is evaluate and assess. So review all potential data sources within the organization to determine their relevance, accuracy, completeness, and stability for inclusion in the master data repository. Evaluation and assessment of data sources. That is the second activity. The third activity is define architecture approach. So decide on the technical and organizational structure for managing master data, which includes selecting between centralized, decentralized, hybrid model to best fit the organization need. The fourth is data model. So develop logical and physical data model that describe the structure, relationship, and attributes of master data entities to ensure consistency and usability across systems. This is a data model. We have to define stewardship and maintenance processes. So establish clear roles, responsibilities, and workflow for data stewards to maintain data quality, resolve issues, and oversee ongoing updates to master data. That is defining the stewardship. Then we have established governance policies. So create and enforce policies, standards, and procedures that set out how master data is created, approved, shared, and retained, ensuring compliance and accountability. And finally, implement data sharing, integration services. So you need to set up the necessary tools and services to enable secure, reliable, and efficient sharing and integration of master data across different business units and IT systems. So these are the MDM activities. So if you are planning an MDM, we need to carry out all these seven activities. So moving on, we will see a data sharing architecture. Already mentioned there are different architecture like registry, transaction hub, consolidated architecture. We may adopt part of the master data. Reference data activities is the next topic we are going to cover. That also has six major activities. Define drivers and requirement. So identify the business motivation and specific needs for implementing reference data management. Secondly, it is assess data sources. So evaluate all potential sources to determine their sustainability, accuracy, and completeness for reference data. So defining architectural approach, that's a third activity. So decide on our technical structure and organizational model for managing reference data across the enterprise. Then model reference data set. So create logical and physical model that describes the structure and relationship of reference data. Define stewardship and maintenance process. Finally, establish reference data governance policies. Some of the techniques on tools. I would request you to go through the book to understand data integration tools, data remediation tools, operational data store, data sharing hubs, data modeling tools, metadata repositories, and MDM application platforms. So software solutions that facilitate the seamless combination of combination and movement of data across diverse systems and platforms. They are for data integration tools. So data integration tool are software solutions that facilitate the seamless combination and movement of data across diverse systems and platforms. So data remediation tools, applications used to identify, correct, and cleanse data errors or inconsistencies to ensure data quality and compliance. Then operational data store, a centralized database designed to consolidate and store current operational data from various sources for reporting and analysis. Data sharing hub, central point that enables secure and efficient distribution and the exchange of data among multiple business units or systems. So data modeling tools, software that helps design, visualize, and document the structure, relationship, and rules of data entities within the organization. Then metadata repositories, they're centralized storage system that manage and provide access to metadata, offering context and governance of organizational data sets. Then finally, we have the MDM application platforms, the comprehensive solution that support the governance, integration, and management of master data across enterprises. So they are the tools and techniques of MDM, master and reference data. So implementation guidelines point of view, there are four guidelines: adhere to master data architecture, monitor data movement, manage reference data change, then data sharing agreements. So adhering to master data architecture means to ensure all master data management activities comply with the defined architecture standards and framework to promote consistency, quality, integration across the organization as recommended by DAMA. Then monitor data movement is track and control the flow of master and reference data between systems to maintain data integrity, lineage, and compliance with governance policies. So manage reference data change. Implement formal process to review, approve, and document changes to reference data, ensuring accuracy, traceability, and as per the DAMA guidelines. The finally data sharing agreements. So establish and maintain documented agreement that define terms, responsibilities, standards for sharing master and reference data within and outside the organization, as recommended by DAMA. Then, of course, the challenge is organizational and cultural changes. They require people to relinquish control of some of their data and process in order to create shared resources. So improving the availability and the quality of reference and master data will undoubtedly require changes to procedures and traditional way of working. Most challenging cultural change is central to governance, demanding which individual are accountable for which decisions: business stewards, architects, managers, and executives, and which decision data steward teams, um, program steering committee, and data governance council should make collaboratively and so on. So these are some of the challenges facing at the organization. Reference and master data governance. Because they are shared resources, reference and master data requires governance and stewardship. And in the governance process, the data sources to be integrated will be determined, the data quality rules to be enforced, the condition of use rules is to be followed, the activities to be monitored and the frequency of monitoring, the priority and the response level of data stewardship effort, how information is to be represented to meet stakeholder needs, standard approval gates, expectations in RDM, MDM deployment. So these all things will be determined at data governance process. Finally, we will also look at matrices, data quality and compliance. which ensure that reference and master data adhere to defined standards, regulatory requirements, supporting trusted business operations in line with the DAMA principles. Data change activity that tracks the modification to reference and master data, enabling effective governance and auditability as recommended by DAMA framework. Then third, data ingestion and consumption. So refers to the process of acquiring and using reference and master data across systems, ensuring consistency and integration per DAMA guidelines. Then we have service level agreements, defines expected performance and availability for references and master data services, supporting accountability and reliability in DAMA aligned data management. Data stewardship coverage. So measures the extent of stewardship assigned to reference and master data, reinforcing DAMA's advocacy for clear role and responsibilities. Then total cost of ownership. So represent the overall expenses related to managing references and master data, helping organization optimize resources in accordance with the DAMA recommendation. And finally, data sharing volume and usage. So indicates how much and how often reference master data is exchanged, promoting transparency and value realization in DAMA based data governance. So these are some of the key matrices we measured at RMD level. Again, I would request you to read the book a couple of times and appear for CDMP exam. Share your feedback as comments and let me know if I can make this better or if you need something different to support your CDMP journey. Of course, we are traveling together. The next session we will cover data warehousing chapter 11 of DAMA.